Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us right here on Real Broadcasting Network. And of course, we'll be looking at issues that are shaping the political landscape as political activities gradually gather more momentum ahead of the 2027 general elections. Nigeria's opposition landscape is once again under intense public scrutiny. Talking about one of which is the African Democratic Congress, ADC, which has recently attracted, prominent opposition figures. It's now battling internal disagreement and leadership questions. At the time, many Nigerians expected the party to, present a united front. We're still here, 6 months to the election, asking questions as to if we have an opposition or not. The situation has reignited a broader debate. Are the challenges confronting the ADC simply the growing pains of a coalition trying to redefine itself, or do they point to something bigger about the nature of opposition politics in Nigeria? Here we go again.
Something bigger indeed. Well, the conversation extends beyond one political party. Now, in recent months, several opposition figures have alleged political intimidation, while others insist that what Nigerians are witnessing are simply the normal consequences of internal party disputes and political competition. Because guess what? You're in the opposition. You're trying to topple the ruling party who, are doing everything within their power to remain the ruling party. They do not want to be addressed as the opposition after the 2027 elections. Now, we're getting ready, of course, for the elections in 2027. Questions are being asked about the health of Nigeria's multi-party democracy. What's the ability of the opposition to effectively organize themselves? And what is the role of democratic institutions in guaranteeing a level playing political field? Now, there's been lots of stories, most recently with regards to the ADC in and out of the court. And in fact, yesterday, the one that we have is the appeal court reserving judgment on appeals seeking to set aside the judgment ordering INEC to deregister the African Democratic Congress and 4 other political parties. So what it means is that as of now, those parties are registered as of now. Okay. Aside from the ADC, other parties seeking nullification of the Federal High Court judgment are the likes of the Action People's Party, that's the APP, the Action Alliance, that's the AA, the Accord Party, which interestingly is the party of Osun State Governor Ademola Adeleke, who is getting ready to seek re-election.
Did you see one of the readiness in church?
That was really...
He was a clergyman, a pastor.
If we're going to judge by how well you lead choruses, just give it to Adeleke.
How well you dance in church.
Oh my goodness!
Like he said, I'm going to dance my way to the state house. Amen. And he's dancing in church. He's preaching the message at the same time. In all, he's a dancing senator. And now a dancing governor. Once a dancing man, we always remain a dancing man.
So, of course, his party is part of those who are seeking to nullify that judgment. And lastly, we have the Zenith Labour Party. Now, recall that the appellate court had on June 16 ordered a stay of execution of the High Court judgment, even as it slammed the trial judge for disregarding the judicial hierarchy. According to the appellate court, even though the trial judge's attention had been drawn to the order for a stay of proceedings, he intentionally flouted it and went ahead to deliver judgment, and saying that Peter Lifu's action, that's Justice Peter Lifu, was a form of judicial impertinence, and stressing that the Supreme Court had previously held that a judge who acts in such a manner is unfit for the bench, as the conduct amounts to judicial rascality. And the High Court said INEC should deregister the 5 political parties, which he said had failed to meet the constitutional requirements needed to warrant their continued existence and participation in future elections. But now that judgment, of course, was set aside. And so what the appeal court did yesterday was to uphold whatever judgment that said, set aside the earlier judgment that said deregister the party. So that's all with regards to that. But even ahead of yesterday, or before yesterday, there was also another judgment which talked about nullification of state congresses, which the implication stipulates that the ADC no longer had a presidential candidate as at 2 days ago. Now, the lawyers are also saying this matter is in court. These are all of the issues we're trying to look at this morning. Well, of course, we have the INEC who are insisting any access codes to the Nafiu Balagombe faction of the ADC. They said they didn't issue any access codes to them, and that the portal code for the party's candidates' nominations was granted exclusively to the Senator David Mark led leadership. Now, it was Malam Mohammed Haruna, who is, of course, the National Commissioner and Chairman of the Voter Information and Voter Education Committee, who, made this known to say, look, the faction or the ADC that we recognize is the one that is headed by former Senate President David Mark, and in fact, they have not issued any access code to Nafiu Balagombe, who continues to parade himself as a leader of the ADC. And in fact, we do also have another faction, the one that produced Dumebe Kachuku as their presidential candidate. So you wonder exactly, in the midst of all of this, is it a failure on the part of the ADC and the opposition to properly organize themselves? Are we going to just go with the narrative, the insinuation in certain quarters that this is an orchestrated attempt by the ruling party, to demoralize and to basically make it really, really difficult for the opposition to mount any sort of opposition ahead of the elections? These are some of the issues we're looking at this morning.
Now, there are some people who say that originally all of these plans have been orchestrated. Don't forget I said some people who said all of these plans are being orchestrated because they were targeting a certain Peter Obi in that party. And that, of course, when the man took to flight, watch the words that I use, and that since he left, the plans that were already in progress, that have been orchestrated, have been put in motion, are no longer being able to be pulled back because the plans were on ground. I wonder what people will be saying now, because those people maintain that the person that was targeted originally by this plan is no longer in the party. Why still go on and target the party anyway?
I mean, those are very legitimate concerns, but I mean, we also do have a strong contender in the person of Atiku Abubakar. So even if we do not have an Obi, the party is still somewhat, experts would say, somewhat strong, particularly with the emergence of Atiku Abubakar as the presidential candidate of the party, and in this case is choosing another formidable personality in the person of Rotimi Amechi, as it were, to be his running mate. So they still have that form of strength, as it were. So if the narrative that is being peddled in some quarters to say, look, this is an orchestrated attempt. Well, I mean, you can just look at the ADC and all of the members within the fold and say, perhaps it is, in fact, well-deserved.
Well, to help us examine this issue more properly, we're joined by a guest of ours who actually,
That's
is
Dr. Olatunde Olayinka.
Olatunde Olayinka Damilola, a lead practitioner at Healthable LP Council, and he is always available for us each time we call upon him. Thank you so much, Olatunde Olayinka Damilola, for joining us this morning.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here.
Council, can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, we start by asking you, the ADC has actually increasingly positioned itself as a platform for opposition politicians ahead of the 2027 elections. Yet, almost as quickly as it positioned itself, the party has found itself dealing with leadership disputes and internal disagreements. So from your assessment, is this simply what happens when different political interests come together? Or are there some things we do not know? Are these divisions deeper than they actually appear on the surface?
Well, thank you. In my own opinion, talking about the situation of the ADC, I actually believe that it is more of an internal problem rather than external influence on the ADC because when we're talking about the party, I don't know if I'm clear. 'Cause, yeah, so when we're talking about the party, this is a party that has been since 2007 and has been able to win 5 legislative seats as of 2011. So we're not talking about a new party coming on board here. We're not talking about a party that is probably not experienced with politics. I feel where the problem of the ADC arises from is the fact that we are now having new members, joining the ADC and, trying to fit into the existing structure to pursue their ambition. And in situations like this, extreme caution has to be applied by the party to ensure that the situation does not escalate into their disadvantage. And that is where I feel like the ADC has not been adequately managing the situation. Compared to the APC in 2013, when they came together to try to take out the ruling PDP government, you can see that there were compromises made by persons who came together to form this party. I mean, from the ATN and the ANPP. As a matter of fact, a joint meeting committee was formed, and then we have Mr. Komitini from the ACN, and then we have Alhaji Ibrahim Fikarau from the ANPP, and they came together to form a coalition where personal interests are set aside to ensure that the collective interest that brought them together is achieved, which was to actually take out the PDP from government. And that was why we also saw persons like the current president, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, taking the backseat for President Buhari to go further and contest in that election. But so far, I feel when it comes to the ADC, the problem has been the problem of personal ambitions trying to take, preeminence over the collective goal, which is to actually be an opposition for the ruling APC. Looking at the ADC since 2025, to be precise, in September 2025, we have had about 6 cases in court, from the party. And most of these cases, I would say 5 or thereabouts of these cases, arise from internal conflict between the leadership of the party. And that is where we see persons like Mr. Rafiu Babagumbe and as well as David Mark trying to contest for the leadership of the party, rather than come together to form a common ground and see how they can actually focus on taking out the ruling APC. So I feel more of the problem the ADC is facing is a problem of implosion. It's coming from deep within, coming from them not being able to manage their internal conflict, And as I believe, or as I would say, I feel some of the problems that the ADC is facing are problems that should have been addressed maybe by trying to sit down, negotiate, come to a compromise, but then going to court, they have a lot of cases in court, even up to the Supreme Court. And now, as at yesterday, we have the Court of Appeal reserving, a judgment on the court case, although that was not brought by the agency. But then we also have one that was given recently in July 13, where the court actually had to dismantle the whole primaries and the whole, all the arrangements made by the led David Mark led administration on the fact that state executive chairman were dissolved. When David Mark came on board, I felt like those decisions, those steps taken so far by the leadership has been, not commendable. And the ADC needs to do better if it's going to take out the APC from government.
All right, I hear you. I pick a couple of things from what you have said. The ADC is not a new party that have been in existence, and you say it's because some few people joined in that they're having some of these problems. But we have other parties, and you rightly pointed out to back in time when the ACN and co came together to form a coalition, and that some people dropped their ambition, at least for some time, for others to move. But looking at what the ADC is facing right now, some people would rather think that it's because we have some strange bedfellows that are coming together that they're having these problems. That looking at ideology, they don't seem to be on the same page. That's why they're having all of this problem. If not, one will have dropped for the other, or one will have sunk his own ambition for the time being for another time. What will your response be to that?
Well, in relation to that, I think I would first like to beg to differ on the fact that maybe there are differences on my ideology. You know, personally, from my own point of view, I do not feel like the ADC is really an opposition that even Nigerians should put so much faith into, because it is more like we are recycling the same set of people now coming under a new skin. A chameleon, whether being yellow, whether being green, is just trying to hide, just trying to give you, this facade of reality. So talking about the internal causes by these new persons, I do not believe it is from ideological line, because I do not think the ADC has any ideology that differs from the existing PDP or the APC. As a matter of fact, looking at all the opposition parties, I would say for now, it is only the AAC that looks like they have a clear-cut ideology, and then maybe I think Nigerians can hope on that as an opposition. But for the ADC, I feel it is more about personal interest here. I feel it is more about personal ambition and clash of ego. Because, for instance, when David Mark led Paxson came on board, I felt like it was a very, very bad move, a very, very terrible move to have dissolved all the state executive, chairman of the party that has been in place before he came on board. And I believe some of these steps were taken in order to probably satisfy, because I don't want to make too much factual assertion because I'm not a member of the agency. But we can see that some of these steps are taken, as a calculated effort to probably advance the ambition of certain persons who join the party. So I feel like the problem is more of personal ambitions, and that is where they need to sit down as gentlemen to try to see what they can do, to try to see how they can come to a compromise. And I feel like the ABC also needs to understand that Nigerians are not looking to get, just the president or just somebody to come on board to fill the position. I think we have been doing that for a long time, and we have not really experienced any remarkable change. Nigeria is looking for a leader that understands the people, understands what needs to be done, understands what needs to be addressed. So if they are still having, leadership process based on the fact that I want to be the president, the Emilio Con kind of feeling, there is no way the ADC will be able to make it work. So I believe that the best way for them to resolve this is by coming into terms with understanding that we are coming to save Nigeria. We should not come for personal ambition. Then they should try to come up with an arrangement that will allow them, come into power, and in a way that they would see any win for the ADC as a collective win. You understand? And not to satisfy, the interest of some person. So that is my view on that.
Well, there are some people who will not agree with you on that because some opposition figures argue that recent developments involving prominent politicians point to a pattern of increasing pressure on opposition voices. They believe that there is a pattern from outside. Some insist that these are unrelated events and that politicians should be accountable for their actions regardless of party affiliation. So if we take a look at it generally, holistically, how should Nigerians distinguish between legitimate law enforcement and actions that could actually be perceived as political pressure, coming from external, not even within the party?
Okay, I think speaking objectively now, it is normal for an average Nigerian to see external action, especially coming from maybe the side of the ruling party, or even the court, as an attempt to try to submerge the opposition. But then, like I earlier said, a house that is divided against itself cannot stand. That is where the first problem is with the ADC. But then, looking at certain actions that has been in the news recently, we cannot but deny that indeed the opposition party is really, really trying all its best to suppress the opposition. I mean, the ruling party is trying to suppress the opposition. When we look at the PDP, for instance, we have members who are in the PDP, who are in the PDAPC, like I would say, they are not here, they are not there, and they are the ones causing, internal rapport. And as a matter of fact, the PDP looks like it has left the stage even before the 2027 general election. And looking at the ADC situation now, especially with the recent action that was filed by, I think, there's this association of legislative leaders or thereabouts
Hmm.
that took an
Yes.
action to the federal, asking the court to interpret Section 225A to determine whether ADC has the requisite eligibility to participate in 2027 election. And we can see that in that particular action, the Attorney General of the Federation was joined. And when a party is on the defense, you naturally expect that, from the common man view, you naturally expect that the defense would come up with something against what has been done by the plaintiff. But we saw that the Attorney General of the Federation put his weight behind the action in the defense. And in fact, their brief went on to argue that ADC should not be allowed to contest the election. And eventually, my Lord Honorable Justice Peter Lipu eventually gave a decision saying that the ADC is not qualified based on the fact that they do not have 25% of the total vote in the previous election. But what I would still maintain is that regardless of the forces that are coming from the external side, I believe what matters the most is for the parties themselves to understand to know what they are doing, to understand how to manage their affairs. Because once they are internal rankers, it's just a matter of time before the ones coming from the outside, breaks the party. And even on the case that was taken to court, for the interpretation of Section 225, it is still something that is very, very controversial. From my own perspective as a lawyer, I feel one of the major challenge with that particular section is as to whether those grounds should be interpreted deductively or conjunctively. Because I think section 225, maybe the C part thereabout, mentioned that a party that has not produced a
You still there?
legislative leader, or a member for election or can be ready. I think now ADC are saying that they have a sitting member in the National Assembly, that is in the House of Rep. So I would just say, as to sum it up, that it is not really a matter of the ruling party trying to break the opposition now. It's also of the opposition, to ensure that they try to put their house in order. Because if you're coming against the APC that we all know to be very tenacious in power, and we're not talking about a party that is very feeble, we're talking about a party that everybody can be criticizing that party, criticizing people elected from that party, and they can turn deaf ears. So if you're coming against a party like that, then it is actually a show of non-seriousness for you to come on board with a lot of internal crisis. So I would just hope that the ADC tries to fix its house in order and prepare for 2027 rather than the old rancor.
All right. I mean, just a whole lot of issues. And lastly, before we let you go, let's talk about the level of involvement of the judiciary in some of these cases. I mean, the 2015 coalition that you had referenced, yes, there was some sort of pressure at the time, but one might want to say not at the level, that the ADC is experiencing now. Taking these cases on leadership, they're taking cases on their legality and registration and a whole lot of issues. The law clearly says that internal affairs should be resolved internally, but we have the courts also entertaining some of these cases and giving judgments on some of them. What should be the role of the judiciary in matters like this?
Okay, thank you. When we're talking about the judiciary, the common man in Nigeria has different perspective of the judiciary. And the judiciary is meant to be an organ to not only settle dispute, but also to ensure that its decisions aligns with public policy and public interest. But when we're looking at most of the decisions that the court has given in recent times on the political landscape, one has to treat one has to treat trying to conceive the perspective of the court with caution. In the decision given by my Lord Honorable Justice Peter in the case where the coalition of legislative leaders asked for the court to interpret Section 225 and asking for the deregistration of ADC. That particular decision brought a lot of controversy. And why most persons on social media, because I do read a lot of comments on social media, were criticizing the Honorable Justice. I feel like the Honorable Justice did justice according to what he deemed fit, especially in the particular circumstances of the literal interpretation of that law. Do you understand? And that is where there is a jurisprudential, difference in how the law is and how the law is to be applied. So what I would just say is that the role of the judiciary properly, or the prospective role of the judiciary in times like this, should be to treat matters of political concern with serious caution, especially having public interest in mind, having the interest of the people in mind, especially the aftermath of those decisions. Because come what it may, if the ADC is deregistered by a court decision, it is not going to sit well with the people,
All
no
right.
matter what the law says. And I feel like that is where the court will
All right.
have to look for a way to ensure that the interpretation of that law
All right.
or of that section is one that favors, the people, that favors the public.
All
And
right.
when it comes to the internal matters of the political party, I know that there have been a couple of decisions saying that the court should not interfere in the internal matters of political parties. As a matter of fact, this is a principle that has been on the electoral jurisprudence for a long time. But nonetheless, when parties also refuse to honor their own internal arrangement, it is proper for the court to come in. Because in the decision given on the 13th of July, I think by the Court of Appeal, dissolving all the caretaker committees that were set up by David Mark-led
All right,
coalition
Barrister
in
Olatunde
ADC.
Olayinka, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
We're sorry to cut in, but we quickly have to go. We're pressed for time
Oh,
on
okay, no
this.
problem, no problem. Thank you for having me. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
we appreciate your time on the program this morning. Thank you. We do hope to have
Thank you.
another conversation with you. But enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
And you too, and you too. Thank you.
Thank you.